The morning sun glared off the glass walls of the Helios Corporation Tower. The building stood like a steel spear in the middle of New York City, its shadow stretching across the busy streets below. Everyone in the city knew this tower. It was where the future was decided. Inside the lobby, security guards scanned everyone carefully. The people walking in weren't normal job applicants, they were the best of the best. Scientists, engineers, programmers, and strategists from across the country had been chosen. 25 candidates in total. They were dressed in sharp suits and polished shoes, their faces calm but their hands tied around leather briefcases. Each one had spent months preparing for this day. They weren't here for a simple job. The Helios Corporation didn't hire employees, it selected people. Anyone chosen by Helios would become part of something powerful and secret. The candidates sat in a wide, white waiting room on a long silver bench. A soft hum came from the walls, as if the building itself was alive. They exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. Everyone wanted to look confident. At the far end of the room, a tall man stood silently, watching them. He was dressed in a simple black suit, no tie. His silver hair was perfectly combed, and his cold, gray eyes studied every detail. He was Richard Hale, CEO of Helios Corporation and one of the richest men in the world. When Richard Hale entered a room, people usually stood up. Not today. Nobody dared move. His presence was heavy, like a storm about to break. 25, Richard said quietly, glancing at a tablet in his hand. His voice was calm but sharp, like a blade. Let's begin. Just as he turned to walk into the next room, the door at the back opened. Everyone turned. A young woman stepped in. She was not dressed like the others. She wore a simple gray dress, no jewelry, no makeup. Her hair was tied back carelessly, and her hands were empty. But what made everyone stare was this: she had no shoes. Her bare feet made no sound on the smooth floor. A murmur ran through the group. Some of the men smirked. A woman in a blue suit shook her head in disbelief. This was Helios Corp. Who came barefoot to an interview like this? Richard Hale's eyes narrowed. He watched her quietly as she walked toward the bench. She didn't rush. She didn't look nervous. She simply found an empty seat and sat down, her calm face showing no fear. The candidates looked at each other. Nobody spoke, but the thought was the same: she's not going to last 5 minutes. Richard finally spoke. You, he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. The young woman looked up. Her eyes were steady, clear, and sharp. Why no shoes? She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. I run faster without them, she said simply. The room went dead silent. Some candidates frowned, confused. Others looked amused. Was this a joke? Richard Hale didn't laugh. He just studied her carefully for a long moment, as if her simple answer was more interesting than any polished speech he had heard today. What's your name? He asked. Emily Carter, she replied. Richard's lips curled into a faint smile. Interesting, he murmured. No one else dared to speak. The tension in the room thickened. A man in a perfect black suit, sitting near Emily, leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "This is serious, you know. You should have dressed better." Emily didn't even look at him. Her calmness felt strange, unnatural almost. She was the only one in the room who wasn't fidgeting, sweating, or pretending to be confident. She just was. Richard turned sharply. "Follow me," he ordered. The candidates stood and followed him down a long hallway lined with glowing screens. Emily walked last, her bare feet silent against the polished floor. The hallway felt endless, and the air was cold. None of the candidates spoke. They had all heard rumors about Helios Corporation's mysterious selection process, but nobody really knew what was coming next. They reached a large metal door at the end of the hallway. Richard placed his hand on a scanner. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a sleek conference room with black glass walls and a massive screen on one side. The candidates sat at a round steel table. Emily sat calmly, still barefoot, her eyes scanning every detail of the room. Richard stood at the head of the table. "You're here because you are the best," he said simply. "But talent is not enough. Today, you'll be tested in ways you've never imagined." A chill ran through the room. Nobody knew what he meant, but they could feel it. The air was heavy, electric. Something about this place felt wrong, like the building itself was watching them. Emily didn't look scared. She just placed her hands on the table, her sharp eyes fixed on Richard Hale. Richard met her gaze. For the first time that morning, a spark of interest lit his face. "This," he said softly, almost to himself, "is going to be interesting." And in that silent moment, no one knew why the CEO seemed so focused on the barefoot girl. But they would all find out soon enough. The conference room door shut behind them with a deep metallic sound. The air inside felt colder, heavier. The candidates sat in a perfect circle, hands folded, eyes fixed on the man standing at the head of the table. Richard Hale didn't smile. He didn't offer water or make small talk. His gray eyes scanned their faces like a machine. "You all think this is a job interview," he said in a calm, even voice. "It's not. Helios Corporation doesn't hire people. We select them." The candidates exchanged uneasy looks. Emily Carter, barefoot and calm, sat perfectly still. She was studying Richard as much as he was studying her. "You were told this position would be demanding," Richard continued, "but no one told you how demanding. Today, you'll show us not your resumes, but your instincts." A tall man in a navy suit raised his hand nervously. "Sir, what exactly?" The lights in the room suddenly cut out. A sharp alarm blared through hidden speakers, making everyone jump. The walls glowed faint red, and a robotic voice echoed. "Security breach. Level 4 lockdown initiated." Panic filled the room. Some candidates gasped. Others grabbed their briefcases like shields. Emily didn't move. Her calm eyes flicked to the corners of the room, scanning the glow from hidden panels. Richard didn't look worried. Instead, he smiled faintly. "Follow me," he said. The candidates hesitated, but when the CEO of Helios moved, you followed. They scrambled to their feet. Emily was the last to stand, her bare feet making no sound against the cold floor. Richard led them out into a hallway lit by flashing red lights. It was nothing like the lobby above. This floor wasn't designed to impress guests. This was military-grade architecture: steel doors, armored guards, and thick security scanners. "Wait, is this real?" one woman whispered. "Are we under attack?" Richard didn't answer. He swiped his hand across a scanner, and the group stepped into a massive freight elevator. The doors closed, and they felt themselves dropping fast. "How far are we going down?" a man in a gray suit asked nervously. "Far enough," Richard said. The elevator stopped with a jolt. The doors opened to reveal something that didn't look like an office at all. They stepped into a secret underground facility. The room was enormous, filled with glowing screens, humming machines, and rows of guards in black armor. Scientists in white coats hurried past, carrying strange-looking tablets. The candidates froze in place, unsure if they were allowed to breathe. Richard turned to face them. "Welcome to Level 7. The real headquarters of Helios Corporation." Emily's sharp eyes scanned everything: security drones floating overhead, glowing panels in the floor, doors marked with strange symbols. This wasn't a normal company. This was something else entirely. Suddenly, the alarm grew louder. "Warning, breach in Sector 9. Soldiers sprinted past, their boots clanging on the steel floor. The candidates shrank back in fear. A man in a black suit whispered, "We should leave. This isn't safe." Richard's voice cut him off. "There's nowhere safer than here. If you can't handle this, leave now." No one moved. Emily stepped forward, her voice calm. "This isn't a real attack." Every head turned to her. Richard's gray eyes lit up. "Explain." Emily gestured around them. "No one's panicking. The scientists, the guards, they're moving fast, but not scared. This is a test, isn't it? You're watching how we react." A slow smile spread across Richard's face. "Correct." The candidates stared in disbelief. "You're testing us like this?" one man asked, his voice shaking. Richard ignored him and turned to Emily. "And yet you're calm. Why?" Emily looked him straight in the eye. "Panic is useless." Richard studied her for a moment longer, then snapped his fingers. A tall woman in tactical gear stepped forward. "Escort them to the maze," Richard ordered. "The maze," one candidate whispered. Emily's expression didn't change. The guard led them down a long hallway. The air grew colder, and the sound of machinery echoed around them. The walls were lined with security cameras. Finally, they stopped in front of a giant steel door. "This," the guard said, "is where your real interview begins." The door opened with a loud hiss, revealing a dimly lit labyrinth of metal corridors. The floor was covered in grated steel, and strange lights glowed from the ceiling. The place smelled faintly of oil and ozone. "This is insane," one man muttered. "We're job candidates, not soldiers." The guard smirked. "Then you'll fail quickly." Emily took a step forward. "What are the rules?" she asked. "No rules," the guard said. "Just survive. Get to the exit. That's all." The door behind them slammed shut. The sound echoed through the steel corridors. A cold wind moved through the maze, and somewhere in the distance, a low mechanical sound rumbled like something was alive in there, waiting. The candidates looked at each other nervously. Some clutched their briefcases like weapons. Emily was already walking. Her bare feet moved silently across the floor. She didn't seem scared. Jason Miller, a tall candidate with a nervous expression, hurried after her. You seem calm." Emily glanced at him. "Fear is useful," she said softly. "But only if you know where to look." And then, as they turned the first corner, a loud metallic crash echoed through the maze. The lights flickered. They weren't alone. The sound of metal crashing echoed through the steel corridors. Everyone froze. The candidates clutched their briefcases tightly, their breaths shallow. The maze was cold, dark, and endless. Emily stood still, her sharp eyes scanning the ceiling. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Jason Miller, the tall man following her, swallowed hard. "What was that?" Before she could answer, a mechanical hum filled the air. A red light flashed above them, and a camera lens swiveled silently in their direction. "They're watching us," Emily murmured. Jason glanced up nervously. "Of course they are. It's part of the test." Emily shook her head. "No. This is more than a test." Suddenly, a loud hiss came from behind. A steel panel in the wall slid open, and a sleek black drone floated into the hallway. Its glowing red sensors locked onto them. "Run!" Emily shouted. The group panicked, scattering in different directions. Some ran blindly down side passages, screaming. The drone fired a warning shot, a bright blue beam that scorched the wall inches from a man's head. He yelled in terror and bolted. Emily grabbed Jason's arm and pulled him down a narrow corridor. "This way." They ran, Emily's bare feet silent against the metal floor. Jason stumbled behind her, nearly tripping over his polished shoes. "How do you know where you're going?" he gasped. "I don't," Emily said calmly. But I know where not to go. They turned sharply, and Emily froze. Ahead of them, the floor was glowing faintly. "Trap," she whispered. Jason looked down. The grated steel floor had a faint orange glow, almost invisible to the untrained eye. Emily crouched low, touching the edge of the metal. "Heat sensors," she muttered. "Step there, and it'll trigger something." Jason's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" Emily didn't answer. She moved carefully, pressing against the wall to avoid the glowing panel. Jason followed her lead. A distant scream echoed through the maze. Someone had triggered a trap. Jason flinched. "This is insane. This isn't a job interview. This is a selection process," Emily finished for him, her voice calm. "They're not looking for who's smart on paper. They're looking for who survives." Jason swallowed hard. "And you're calm." Emily didn't look at him. "I've been in worse places." Jason wanted to ask what she meant, but another sound stopped him, a faint mechanical hiss. Emily raised her hand, signaling him to be silent. Ahead of them, another drone floated into view, its red sensors glowing brighter as it scanned the corridor. Emily grabbed Jason and pulled him into a shadowed alcove. The drone drifted past them, scanning the area. "Stay low," she whispered. Jason's heart pounded. He could hear the soft hum of the drone's engines. It paused, its sensors flickering. Emily didn't move. She didn't even breathe. After a tense moment, the drone floated away. Emily exhaled softly. "We need to get to the center," she whispered. Jason frowned. "Center? Why not the exit?" Emily glanced at him. "Because this isn't about escaping. This is about what's in the middle." Jason blinked. "And how would you know that?" Emily gave him a small smile. "Because that's what I'd do if I designed this test." Jason stared at her, confused but impressed. He had never met anyone like her. They moved deeper into the maze, Emily leading the way. The air grew colder, and the hum of machines grew louder. The corridors twisted and turned like a puzzle meant to break them. At one point, they found another candidate, Lena, a woman in a blue suit sitting on the floor, trembling. "Are you hurt?" Emily asked softly. Lena shook her head. "No, but I can't do this. I can't." Emily knelt down. "You're fine. You just need to move." Lena looked at her in disbelief. "You're barefoot. How are you not terrified?" Emily smiled faintly. "Shoes don't make you brave." She helped Lena to her feet, guiding her forward. Jason followed behind them, still shaken but trying to keep up. The group moved carefully through another section of the maze. They passed more glowing floor panels, narrow passages, and silent cameras watching from above. Emily seemed to know exactly where to step and where not to. Jason whispered, "You've done something like this before, haven't you?" Emily didn't answer, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a shadow of memory. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared. Red lights flashed. The walls shifted with a deep grinding sound, and the corridor ahead of them sealed shut. They spun around. The way they had come was now blocked, too. They were trapped. The floor panels beneath them began to glow bright orange. Emily's eyes widened. "Move," she shouted. They ran, the floor heating beneath their feet. Emily's bare feet were quick and silent, but Jason and Lena stumbled as the floor panels lit up behind them. A trapdoor opened suddenly, and Jason nearly fell. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him to safety. "Thanks," he gasped, pale with fear. Emily didn't respond. She was already scanning for the next danger. They turned a corner and stopped abruptly. In front of them was a massive steel door with a glowing scanner panel. Unlike the other corridors, this one had no traps, no drones. Just silence. Emily stepped forward slowly. She placed her hand on the glowing scanner. The door hissed open. Jason and Lena stared at her. How did you know it would open for you? Jason asked. Emily smiled faintly. I didn't. Behind the door was a dark chamber glowing faintly with blue light. In the center of the room sat a strange metallic cube covered in alien markings. Emily's breath caught. She took a slow step forward. This, she whispered, is what they're looking for. The glowing blue light filled the chamber, painting Emily's face in an otherworldly glow. The cube sat on a black pedestal, humming softly, its alien markings shifting like liquid metal. It wasn't just a device. It felt alive. Jason stepped forward slowly, his eyes wide. What is that thing? Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. The closer she moved, the more she felt something like a faint whisper in her mind. The cube was speaking to her, but not with words. Lena grabbed Jason's arm. We shouldn't be here, she whispered, her voice shaking. This isn't part of a job interview. This is something else. Emily placed a hand on the edge of the pedestal. The cube pulsed with light, glowing brighter as her fingers hovered over it. Jason took a step back. Emily, maybe don't touch it. But Emily didn't listen. Slowly, she rested her fingertips on the surface. The entire chamber lit up. The alien markings on the walls glowed the same blue as the cube. A deep, mechanical sound vibrated through the floor, and a holographic map appeared above the device, showing stars, hundreds of them, with strange red symbols flashing across several points. Jason and Lena gasped. What the hell is this? Jason whispered. Emily's voice was calm, but her eyes were wide with awe. It's a navigation map. But it's not from here. This isn't human technology. Lena shook her head, stepping back. This isn't right. Why would a company have alien tech? The door behind them slid open with a hiss. Richard Hale stepped into the room, flanked by two heavily armed guards. His expression was calm, but there was a glint of excitement in his gray eyes. Because, he said smoothly, Helios Corporation isn't just a company. We're Earth's shield. Jason and Lena turned toward him, fear and confusion in their faces. Richard walked closer, hands behind his back. 50 years ago, something crashed in the Nevada desert. Something not from this planet. Governments buried it, locked it away, called it a weather balloon. But we studied it. He nodded toward the cube. That's a piece of it. The only working piece. It took us decades to even scratch the surface of its design. And in all those years, we found no one who could unlock it. Emily turned to him slowly. Until now. Richard smiled faintly. Exactly. Jason took a step forward. So this was never an interview. Richard shook his head. No. This was a hunt. We were searching for someone who could interact with the technology. Someone who could see beyond what's obvious. And Emily Carter, his voice dropped slightly. You're the first person to ever wake it up. Emily's mind raced. She wanted to ask questions, but before she could speak, alarms blared through the room. A robotic voice echoed overhead. Warning. Level 7 perimeter breach. Hostile entities detected. Richard's calm expression didn't change. They're here. Jason spun around. They? Who's they? Richard looked at him coldly. The ones who left that cube behind. Suddenly, the walls shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The guards raised their rifles as a massive metallic crash echoed through the corridors outside. Emily turned to Richard. You mean, aliens? Richard smirked slightly. Not the friendly kind. The door slammed shut behind them, locking automatically. The holographic star map flickered as the cube's hum grew louder, almost like it was reacting to the chaos. Another crash echoed, this time closer. A deep screeching sound followed, like metal tearing. Jason and Lena pressed themselves against the wall, terrified. The guards raised their weapons, aiming at the door. Richard stayed calm, his hands clasped behind his back. "Emily," he said firmly, "do you feel it?" Emily turned to him, startled. "Feel what?" "The connection," Richard said, nodding toward the glowing cube. "It's responding to you. That's why you're here. That's why you were chosen." Emily looked at the cube. Its markings shifted again, glowing brighter under her touch. The hum grew deeper, vibrating in her chest. She didn't know why, but she understood something instinctively. This device wasn't just a weapon or a machine. It was a key. The walls shook again, and this time, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Something massive was approaching. The guards aimed their weapons at the door, tense and ready. One of them looked at Richard nervously. "Sir, if they breach." "They won't," Richard said calmly, his gaze fixed on Emily. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. She had never been in a situation like this, but she wasn't scared. Somehow, she knew the cube wasn't dangerous to her, it was waiting for her. She reached out again, placing both hands on the surface. The holographic map above it shifted, zooming in on one glowing red point. A strange alien symbol appeared in the air. Jason stared in disbelief. She's controlling it." Suddenly, the cube released a pulse of blue energy. The lights in the chamber flickered, and the walls around them glowed with strange markings. The alien footsteps outside stopped. The guards lowered their weapons slightly, stunned. Emily opened her eyes slowly. "It knows me," she whispered. Richard smiled. "Exactly." The door shook violently as something slammed against it, but instead of breaking open, the glowing markings on the walls pulsed brighter. A shield of light formed around the entrance. The creatures outside hissed and screeched but didn't enter. Jason's mouth dropped open. She stopped them." Emily stepped back from the cube, her hands trembling. She didn't fully understand what she had done, but she knew this wasn't over. Richard turned to his guards. "Escort her to the command center. No one touches her. She's the most valuable person on this planet now." Jason and Lena exchanged shocked glances. Emily Carter, the barefoot girl everyone had underestimated, wasn't just a candidate anymore. She was the key to Earth's defense. But outside the sealed door, the alien attackers regrouped, their screeches echoing through the halls. This was just the beginning. The boardroom was silent. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were waiting to hear the final decision. 24 well-dressed candidates sat nervously, their polished shoes tapping against the floor, their perfect suits no longer giving them confidence. Only Emily sat calmly, barefoot, her small notebook resting on her lap. Mr. Carter stood at the head of the table, hands behind his back, his sharp eyes scanning every face in the room. He didn't speak right away. He wanted them to feel the weight of this moment. "You've all been tested," he finally said, his voice deep and firm. "I've seen your ideas, your presentations, and your confidence. But only one of you will lead this project. Only one of you showed me something more than numbers and fancy words." The candidates leaned forward, holding their breath. Mr. Carter turned to Emily. "Stand up." Emily slowly rose from her seat. Her bare feet touched the cold marble floor, but she didn't care. She had expected to be sent home hours ago, yet here she was. "Emily," Carter said, "why didn't you wear shoes today?" The question caught everyone off guard. The other candidates smirked. Some even chuckled quietly. Emily took a deep breath. I couldn't afford them," she said honestly. "But I didn't want to miss this chance. I wanted to prove that ideas matter more than appearances." So, I came as I am. A heavy silence followed. No one expected such a simple, honest answer. Mr. Carter's face softened for the first time. He walked over to Emily and placed a folder in her hands. "Congratulations," he said. "The project is yours." Gasps filled the room. Some candidates protested. "She's barefoot," one man exclaimed. "She doesn't even look professional." Carter turned sharply. "And yet she outsmarted all of you," he said. "She solved problems none of you could. She stayed calm under pressure. She saw things differently. I don't hire appearances. I hire vision." Emily's eyes widened as she opened the folder. Inside was a contract with her name printed in bold letters. A six-figure salary. A leadership role. Her life had just changed forever. "Why me?" Emily asked softly, still in shock. Carter smiled. "Because I wasn't looking for someone who looked like success. I was looking for someone who is success. You've struggled, Emily. You've learned to fight for every opportunity. That makes you dangerous in the best way." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. She stood taller, barefoot, and proud, as the other candidates watched in disbelief. Mr. Carter turned to his assistant. "Get her everything she needs. A wardrobe, a personal driver, and an office next to mine. She starts tomorrow." Emily clutched the folder tightly. The girl who walked into this building with nothing was now walking out with everything she had ever dreamed of. As she left the room, the other candidates stared in stunned silence. Some were angry, others confused. But deep down, they all knew why she was chosen. She was different. She was real. And sometimes, the one who walks in without shoes is the one who walks out with the world at her feet.